Hey there, Bible nerds. Welcome to Chapters and Chocos by Kaye, where we dive into the Bible chapter by chapter. So you have joined me in episode 5. We've journeyed through burning bushes, epic plagues, a miraculous sea split escape, and heard the big 10 commandments. Now you might think the story would slow down after those famous 10 laws, but hold on to your sandals. Today we're going to dive into Exodus chapters 21 through 25, and where things get surprisingly detailed, occasionally eyebrow raising, but always interesting. So grab your drink, get cozy, and let's dive in. So, chapter 21. So imagine the scene. Moses comes down from the thick cloud on Mount Sinai with a gleam in his eyes and several scrolls worth of instructions. The people of Israel lean in, expecting more thunderous proclamation. Instead, they hear Moses clear his throat and say, "These are the ordinances you shall set before them." Like, yeah, we're going into legal territory. But fear not, this isn't your boring courtroom drama. It's ancient justice with a divine twist, delivered in a story form. Moses begins to relay God's laws to the people, and it's like he's reading out clauses of a brand new societal constitution. First on the docket, slavery, or more specifically, Hebrew indentured servitude. God addresses something very real for this freshly freed people. Um, so, if you buy a Hebrew slave, he serves 6 years, and in the seventh year, he goes free, no payment required. The crowd exchanges surprised glances like, wait, what? A slave that goes free after 7 years? Yeah, that's right. These ex-slaves learn that no one among them will be enslaved for life, unless you choose it. But we'll get to that. It's a radical shift from the endless slavery they endured in Egypt. So picture young Levi in the crowd nudging his friend, like, "Did I hear that right? 6 years max, and then poof, free." So Moses continues. Um, if the servant came single, he leaves single. If he was married, his wife leaves with him. But if his master provided a wife and they had kids, the wife and kids remain with the master. That's kind of, weird. But, anyways, that also kind of seemed harsh too. But there's an interesting provision. If the servant loves his master and family so much that he doesn't want to go free, he can opt for, a forever status. The ritual for that is that they take him to a doorpost and pierce his ears with an owl or awl. Um, so it's a piercing ear piercing ceremony. The ancient sign of a lifetime commitment, perhaps the first recorded instance of getting pierced for love. One can imagine our hypothetical servant grinning. "I love my master and my wife and kids. I'm staying." Um, and coming away with a market ear to show it. It's a bit of drama right at the start of the law code, actually. Now, what about women in servitude? Moses relays laws to protect them too. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, which sounds unsettling to us, but back then could be a form of arranged marriage or apprenticeship, she isn't to be treated like the men or, just kicked out after 6 years with nothing. If the master wanted to marry her, then, but then is not pleased, he cannot sell her off to foreigners. He must let her be redeemed, essentially freed by her family. If he intended to marry his son, he must treat her as a daughter. And if the master takes another wife, like, because polygamy was a thing then, he still must provide the first woman food, clothing, and marital rights. So yes, you heard that. Even 3,300 years ago, the law said you gotta take care of all your wives' food, wardrobe, and conjugal love. So no neglect allowed. If he fails to give her those basic things, the law says she can leave free, no debt. So, amid an ancient patriarchal culture, we see seeds of fairness. A woman isn't to be tossed aside without support. So, next, Moses addresses the crowd regarding personal injuries and violence. It's like a series of case studies. So, for premeditated murder, whoever strikes someone and kills them on purpose shall be put to death. So the people nod solemnly, life for life, murder is a capital crime. But what if it's an accident? So Moses explains God's provision. If the killing wasn't intentional, maybe a scruffle gone wrong, there will be a safe place for the killer to flee. Later, we'll know these as sanctuary cities. However, if someone schemes and murders maliciously, not even the altar of God will protect them. Justice will be served, no sanctuary for the conniving murderer. Moses continues, listing offenses that would shock us today but emphasize the value of family and life back then, such as striking or cursing your parents. Yes, even just cursing them was a capital offense under these laws. It's just something that I could use. Tell my daughter, but you know what? I only tell her we must respect our parents. Anyway, so yeah. Every teenager in the camp probably, gulped hard at that one, suddenly extra respectful toward, mom and dad. Also, kidnapping. Snatching someone to sell as a slave is a capital crime, as it should be. God is making it clear in this new society certain lines must not be crossed. Now imagine two Israelites tussling over something silly, say whose camel drank from whose well. They start throwing punches. One guy smacks the other with a stone or fist. If the injured party doesn't die but is bedridden, the assailant isn't executed since it wasn't deadly. But here's the kicker: he must pay for the lost time and ensure the victim is completely healed. So no get well soon card or and walking away, but you break it, you bought it, you injure it, you cover the doctor's bills and lost wages. It's basically an ancient personal injury law. Make the victim whole again. One law that surely made everyone's jaw drop next was about the slaves and punishments. So if a master beats his servant and the servant dies immediately, it's treated as murder. The master will be punished. But if the servant survives a day or two, the situation is handled differently. Under the rationale that the slave is the master's property and presumably the intent was not to kill, it's a tough one to hear now. Certainly not, HR policy today, but in context, it was actually putting a legal check on a master's brutality, a concept basically unheard of in many surrounding nations. And in a surprising twist, if a master's punishment permanently injures a slave, say destroy an eye or even knocks out a tooth that that slave goes free as compensation. Imagine a slave walking out of the house, gap tooth, but grinning because the lost tooth just earned him his liberty. It's rough justice, but it's justice nonetheless. Um, Injure your servants, lose your investment. So think twice before you swing, that arm or that rod. Now let's talk oxen and mayhem. Yes, God's Law even had a section that sounds like it belongs in Farmer Joe's Almanac. What to do if your ox gores someone? The people lean in, perhaps hiding smiles. It might sound almost comical, but it's serious business in an agrarian community. Moses exclaims, if an ox or a big bull gores a person to death, that ox must be stoned to death. Execution for the killer animal. And nobody is to eat the meat from that animal that was just stoned to death. um it's tainted by the act, so to speak. However, the owner of the ox is not held liable. It's because it's considered a tragic animal accident. But Moses raises a finger. If that ox was known to be aggressive in the past, a serial, gorer, and the owner did nothing to keep it, penned up, then we've got an owner negligence. In that case, if it's, someone, the ox is stoned and the owner faces a penalty. But if it kills someone, the ox is stoned and that owner faces penalty, potentially death himself for allowing a lethal hazard to roam. Same thing, like, now for say dog owners, and that dog is known to be vicious and attacks and bites, and the owner just walks with the dog unleashed, then that's owner negligence. So so anyways, so the penalty is death for the owner. You can imagine a murmur in the crowd back then saying, better get old Bessie a stronger fence, eh? Or, just make sure your vicious animals just are, fenced. Period. However, there's a clause of mercy. The owner's life could be spared if he pays a hefty ransom for the loss, whatever amount is demanded as a price of redemption. So essentially, an ancient form of manslaughter charged with a fine. If the ox gores a slave, there's a fixed compensation to the master, 30 shekels of silver, and of course, the ox still gets stoned. A little fun fact: 30 shekels will later show up elsewhere in the Bible as a significant price, but I digress. The law continues rapid fire, so I'm just gonna talk pretty. I'm gonna try to go through this very fast because it's a lot. I have like, well, granted, yeah, I have like about 30 pages of, you know, of research. So I'm gonna try to go all these things like very fast. Where was I? So if people gets into a fight and accidentally hurt a pregnant woman, causing her to miscarry, that's very serious. Of course, very serious. If no further harm follows, the woman is not otherwise injured. The offender pays whatever fine the husband and judge agree on. But if there is further injury, the law gives the famous principle: life for a life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, foot for a foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So this wasn't God endorsing vengeance so much as setting a principle of proportional justice. Like, don't go overboard. The punishment should fit the crime, no more. We'll reflect more on this in our corners section. It's it's not the barbaric rule, but some, like some think it is. So by now, the crowd might be both astonished and relieved. These laws are painting a picture of a community governed by uh, justice and responsibility. Everyone is accountable, whether rich or poor, master or servant, even animals and their owners. So Moses likely pauses to let it sink in. Like, this is what it means to be God's people, to live justly with one another. He covers a few more scenarios. Like, if someone digs a pit and doesn't cover it, and your neighbor's ox or donkey falls in and dies, guess what? The pit digger owes the animal owner money. The value of the beast and the dead animal becomes his. Like finders, weepers, I suppose. If two men's oxen get into a bullfight and the ox kills the other, they normally would sell the ox and split the money and the meat of the dead one. But if the aggressive ox had a reputation and the owner didn't restrain it, kind of like from earlier, then it's on the negligent owner to fully compensate. A live ox for a dead one, and he keeps the carcass. So, chapter 21 is like a crash course of ancient Near Eastern Law 101. But through all these cases, slaves, personal injuries, ox accidents, like, can you sense the common thread? It's about fairness and value for life and limb. Like, each person, even each animal has a place in this community, and there are boundaries to respect. For people who just escape brutal slavery and chaos, these laws give order and dignity. Like they say, hey, we're not in Egypt anymore, where, where might made right. Um, Here, under God, justice makes right. So, ends the first batch of laws Moses lays out. The people exhale. It's a lot to take in. But the journey through the law has only begun. So stay tuned because, the next chapter will bring even more intriguing ordinances. Ever, through the Bible would mention fencing laws and witchcraft in the same breath. Like it does. Anyways, in chapter that was a lot. I'm trying to like slow down. So in chapter 21, we see that God cares about justice in everyday life. These laws might sound foreign or harsh to us, but they were meant to create a fair and safe society. Think about it. A slave isn't stuck forever. There's hope of freedom after 6 years. They're released. Like violence and harm are addressed with proportional penalties. The famous eye for an eye was actually about limiting revenge and insisting the punishment matches the crime, not exceeds. Even an animal causing harm is taken seriously, and the owner is responsible for controlling known dangers. The reflection here is that God was teaching a newly freed people how to respect each other's life, family, and property. There's a concern for human dignity, protecting servants, um, women, the injured, embedded in the laws. While some specifics don't apply to us directly today, like I doubt you have an ox goring your neighbor's ox, but you might have a dog who might be very vicious. So the principles do take responsibility for your actions. So make restitution when you wrong someone. Value life and pursue fairness. It's a call to live justly in a world that can often feel unjust. It's heartening to remember that the foundation of God's law was justice tempered with mercy. Okay, I'm gonna take a water break real quick. Okay. So, fun fact corner. So, the famous law, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, etc., wasn't a license for revenge, but a way to limit retaliation. In ancient times, without such a rule, a simple injury could spark an escalating feud. This law, known as Lex Talionis, made sure the punishment didn't exceed the crime. Justice had to be equal, not excessive. In fact, it often led to monetary compensation equal to the injury's value rather than literal eye gouging like like in Jewish practice. Um its intent was to restrain vengeance, a principle that underlies many modern legal systems too. All right, another fun fact. So, unlike the perpetual slavery common in other cultures, Israelite slaves, more like servants working off debts, were freed in their seventh year. They could only become lifelong servants by choice, though that through that the ear piercing ritual. This was remarkably progressive. It acknowledged that servitude was usually a temporary state, not an identity. Every servant had an end date to look forward to, kind of like a contract. So you have a 6 year contract. So this humanitarian limit distinguished Israel's law from many others. Um, God was injecting compassion into a harsh ancient reality. All right, that is it for chapter 21. All right, chapter 22. Don't steal, don't cheat, and don't witchcraft. Wow, I still have a lot to go. All right. So this chapter picks up right where we left off in Um, chapter 21. Um, so think of it as God's community guidelines continued. The topics everything from property theft to social responsibility to some rather mystical prohibitions. So let's dive in with with the story. So Moses stands before the people, likely on a different day, or maybe just continuing the long reading of the book of the covenant, as these chapters are often called. So he announces laws about property and restitution, essentially what to do when someone steals or damages someone else's stuff. You can almost hear farmers and herdsmen in the crowd muttering, "Listen up, folks, this one is important." So, theft and payback. If someone steals an ox or sheep and either slaughters or sells it, Moses declares the thief must repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for number four a sheep for a sheep. That's a hefty penalty. Steal one, pay back fivefold in some cases. So why the difference? 5 oxen versus 4 sheep. Perhaps because an ox is a work animal vital for plowing, so theft harms the owner's livelihood more. Regardless, the message is clear: crime doesn't pay. In fact, it costs. The crowd likely nods in approval and deterred indeed. No medieval slap on the wrist fines here. Like you steal, you pay back big time. Another one is caught in the act. So what if the thief is caught red-handed breaking in? Moses continues, if it's nighttime and a homeowner strikes the intruder and the thief dies, the homeowner is not guilty of bloodshed. In the dark, you can't tell intent. Self defense gets the benefit of the doubt. Um, but if it's daylight and someone could presumably see the thief's intent or identity, then lethal force is not automatically excused. If the thief is killed in daylight, that could be considered guilt for the defender. Interesting, even back then, there was a concept of reasonable defense and restraint. Also, if the thief is caught alive, he must make full restitution. If he has nothing to pay, guess what? He shall be sold to pay for his theft. Essentially, the thief works off the debt in servitude. So crime equals forced community service of the most literal kind. Another one is property damage. So Moses goes on saying, if someone's animals graze in another's field or vineyard, basically, if you let a goat wander and it mows down the neighbor's vegetable patch, you must repay with the best of your own field or vineyard. So you can't give them the crummy produce. You owe them top quality compensation. That rule probably made folks more careful to tie up their goats at night for sure. Another one, fire hazard. Now, imagine an ancient Smokey the Bear moment. If you start a fire and it spreads to thorns and then to stacked grains or standing grain crops, so that the field is consumed, the one who started the fire must make full restitution. In other words, if you play with fire, you literally pay for the fire. No oops, sorry about your burned farm. Like you break it, you buy it as always. The laws then cover safekeeping and trust. Suppose your neighbor gives you some money or goods to hold for keeping, and then it gets stolen from your house. If the thief is caught, the thief pays back double. If not caught, then the homeowner, the one holding the goods, must come before a judge to swear, I didn't lay a hand on that stuff. If there's any suspicion he did embezzle his friend's goods, it gets settled by an oath to the Lord and the matter is resolved. Honesty is expected. This is essentially an ancient deposit or bailment law establishing trust and honesty in community dealings. Um, they even had a process for disputed ownership. So if two people claim, that's my ox, or this cloak is mine, they present their case to God, likely through judges or priests, and whoever is found guilty of lying has to pay double to the other. So false claims were costly. So think twice before trying to swindle property through the courts. Next one, borrowed items. If you borrow a neighbor's donkey or tools and gets hurt or stolen while in your care, you owe restitution. Unless the owner was with it, like if the owner was helping and it died under his watch too, then presumably it's not solely your fault. If it was hired or rented, the idea is the rental fee covers such loss. So basically, insurance via the rental fee. Very practical. It's like saying if you rented a U-Haul donkey and it twists an ankle, well, that's covered in the rental cost. Now shifting from property to people relations. Moses brings up something a bit spicy. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and they sleep together, he must pay the bride price and marry her. A few young men in the crowd suddenly find their sandals very interesting. This law essentially says no using a girl and tossing her aside. If you're enough of a charmer to get her to bed, you'd better be honorable enough to take her to the altar. The bride price was the customary gift to the girl's family. If the father utterly refuses to give his daughter to the rascal, maybe he thinks the guy is trouble, the man still must pay the equivalent in dowry that virgins get. In short, he can't get off scot free after stealing that girl's honor. He at least pays her settlement. It's not exactly a romantic, shotgun wedding law, but it provides protection for the women's future in a society where vaginal marriage was her security. Now, drumroll. Do I have a thing for that? Nope. So, some rapid fire laws that show how seriously God takes fidelity to Him and moral order. One. Here's another one. Here's one. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. This is in Exodus 22, verse 18. So I imagine an audible gasp among the people. Witchcraft, spells, occult practices, God bans it with deadly seriousness. Any dabbling in magic to manipulate or channel other god spirits was a capital offense. God just demonstrated his supreme power in Egypt over all their magic. He doesn't want Israel getting involved in dark stuff. We'll talk in the fun facts about how this one line sadly had echoed in history far beyond its original intent. Also, at the same time, he didn't say those are not true, so that's kind of interesting. Um, except for like, you know what? I'm not even gonna go there. So whoever lies, here's another one. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. First of all, that's very gross. This is in Exodus chapter 22, verse 19. But that's pretty straightforward and disturbing to think people needed to be told. Honestly, the people hearing this probably cringe and nod like got it. Well, it's very abhorrent. First of all, another one. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be utterly destroyed. Period. Worshipping other gods is treason against the Lord who just saved you. It's spiritual betrayal of the highest order, and the law doesn't tolerate it. Remember, they're headed to a land full of idol worship. God is laying down the law literally. No other gods allowed. After those 7 lines, don't shift back to societal compassion. Moses conveys God's heart for the vulnerable. You shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien foreigner because you were alien in Egypt. Imagine a quiet murmur of agreement, having lived as strangers in a foreign land and oppressed at that. Israel is to remember that feeling and never do the same to others living among them. And then you shall not mistreat any widow or orphan. These were the most vulnerable members of society, no husband or father to provide or defend them. God basically says, don't you dare take advantage of their weaknesses. If you do and they cry out to me, I will hear their cry and my anger will burn. God really does have a soft heart for, like single moms and kids who do not have fathers. He really does have a soft heart for for people who are in situation like mine. So it makes my heart very happy. Anyways, where was I? Hang on. Um, he even warns, "I will kill you with the sword, and your own wives will become widows, and your children orphans." Like that's actually death. Like God is essentially saying, measure for measure, hurt the helpless, and you'll find yourself in their position. It shows us how passionately God defends the defenseless. The people likely exchange sober looks. Note to self: be kind to widows and orphans. God is watching. Let me just drink my water. Oh my gosh, I'm not even halfway in. I already finished all my water. So Moses continues with a law about loans and interest. If you lend money to the poor among you, don't act like a money lender. No interest. This is in verse 25. In other words, don't profit off a poor brother's desperation. Also, if your neighbor gives you his cloak as a pledge for a loan, you must return it by nightfall. Why? Because it might be his only blanket to sleep in. He'll be cold without it, and if he cries out to God, God says, "I will listen, for I am compassionate." So picture an Israelite returning a coat at sundown with a reminder, "Don't worry, friend, I just needed collateral during the day. But here, stay warm tonight." So it's a beautiful, humane touch in the law, even in transactions. Compassion trumps greed. Wow. Uh, so we get some rapid commands to wrap up the chapter. Do not blaspheme God or curse a leader of your people. Basically, respect God and the authorities. Perhaps some folks glance guiltily if they'd been grumbling about Moses or the tribal elders. Like, don't delay to offer your abundance and your firstborn. God calls for the first fruits of harvest and the firstborn of sons and the livestock to be dedicated to him. The sons are redeemed, of course, not sacrificed, unlike pagan practice. Likely the details of redemption were understood or explained somewhere. They are to give God their first and best, acknowledging everything comes from him. And finally, you shall be holy people to me. You must not eat any flesh torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw in the dogs. So this one paints a vivid picture. If a wild animal kills something, you don't scavenge it for dinner. God's people aren't to be like wild animals or desperate scavengers. Um, they keep a standard of dietary holiness. Plus, eating roadkill is generally a bad idea for health. Ancient, public health measure perhaps. Uh, throw it to the dogs. Literally, the unclean animals can have the unclean meat. But you Israel, maintain purity. Chapter 22 covered a lot of ground quickly. We saw laws promoting honesty, restitution, and kindness. Return your neighbor's stray property, repay what you steal, uh, and so on. But also, there were solemn commands about loyalty to God and avoiding evil practices like sorcery and idolatry. Uh, oh, anyways, I think we're just gonna go ahead and skip some fun facts. Oh, actually, no, I don't want to skip this one. So, fun fact corner. So, the witch trials and Exodus, um, 22 verse 18. The verse says, "You shall not permit a sorceress to live." Might be one of the most infamous one-liners from the Testament. This law was meant to safeguard Israel from occult influence in a time and place where pagan magic was a real threat. Unfortunately, centuries later, this verse was taken out of context and used to justify the European and Salem witch hunts, leading to the execution of many accused witches, usually women. The King James wording, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live" became a rallying cry in those trials. So of course, the hysteria and injustice of witch hunts were a far cry from the orderly justice God intended, which required true guilt, not rumor of scapegoating. It's a sobering example of how a scripture text can be misused in history. A not so fun fact, perhaps, but an important one, and I wanted to talk about that. All right, just one fun fact, and that's it for chapter 22. All right, chapter 30, 23. Justice, Sabbaths, and an angelic tour guide. So this chapter rounds out the book of the covenant with a diverse set of commands. It's like the finale of this law code, hitting notes of justice, mercy, worship, and trust in God's guidance. Think of it as the miscellaneous but important section. From court ethics to holiday calendars to an angel on special assignment. So let's bring it to life. So Moses addresses the people likely with a tone of earnestness, because the first part is all about justice and honesty, the foundation of a healthy society. All right, so no false reports. You shall not spread a false report. In modern lingo, no rumor, mongering, or fake news. Don't be the guy who lies about someone or something. It's a plea for truthfulness. Next one, don't join the wicked by being a malicious witness. In other words, don't team up with a don't team up in perjury or for false testimony just because others are doing it. The next line reinforces this thing. You shall not follow a majority in wrongdoing. So this is in Exodus 23 verse 2. So picture Moses pointing at the crowd just because everyone's doing it doesn't make it right. Even if everyone says this guy did it, you must not pervert justice. It's the classic don't follow the crowd off a cliff wisdom, you know, applied legally. Interestingly, the text also adds, nor shall you side with the majority to pervert justice, nor shall you be partial to the poor in a lawsuit. So, wait, so not partial to the poor, like didn't God care for the poor? Of course he did, but justice must be fair to rich and poor alike. So judges shouldn't say, "Well, this guy is poor, let's bend the rule in his favor," any more than they should favor the rich. Justice lady holds her scales evenly. So the message impartiality, no bribes, no mob pressure, and no sub story bias either. Right is right, wrong is wrong, regardless of who is involved, whether they're rich or poor. Whew, now comes a beautiful scenario that shows the law's moral heights. Kindness to enemies. Moses proclaimed, "Oh, if you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, you must surely bring it back to him." So pause and imagine that. There is someone in the camp you absolutely despise or who despises you. One morning you see his donkey strolling down the road, lost. Natural human impulse, like, ha, serves you right. I'll let that dumb donkey go wander in the desert. But God's law says no. Lead the donkey back to its owner, even if he is your enemy. And it doesn't stop there. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you collapse under its load, don't walk away. Help him out. So essentially, be a good neighbor, even to bad neighbors. Like, this is like a preview of love your enemies centuries before Jesus said it. So the people listening might have shifted uncomfortably. It's easier to follow rules about not stealing than rules about helping your foe fix a flat tire or an overburdened donkey out of sheer compassion. Yet here it is, God injecting empathy even into enemy relations. Another one, no bribery or oppression. So Moses continues, "You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor." Wait, hang on, let me read that again. "You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in their lawsuits. Keep far from a false charge and do not kill the innocent or the righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked." So that's in verse 6 to 7. So don't deny a poor person justice just because they can't grease the wheels or lack influence. The poor should get the same fair hearing. And God basically says, I see everything. If you falsely condemn someone, know that the guilty party, including a crooked judge, won't be acquitted by me. Then the famous command, you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the officials and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. And that's in verse 8. We can imagine some, no, knowing nods. Everyone knows how a little gift can make a judge or official suddenly have poor vision regarding the truth. Whew. God outright bans it. No bribes, period. And again, you shall not oppress a stranger. You know the heart of a stranger, for you were strangers in Egypt. This repeats an earlier sentiment. Remember how being aliens felt. Don't do that to others. It's like saying, I'm building a society with justice and compassion as its pillars. We'll have none of the Egypt style corruption or xenophobia here. With justice and kindness emphasized, Moses moves to laws about time and worship. So, sabbatical year. This is in chapter 23, verse 10 to 11. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather its yield, but the seventh year you shall let it rest and lie fallow. The crowd of farmers probably exchanged glances like an entire year with no planting and pruning. Like, yes, so that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the wild animals may eat. Essentially, even every seventh year, don't farm your fields, whatever grows by itself. Volunteers from leftover seeds is free game for the needy and the wildlife. It's like an environmental and social Sabbath. The land gets a break, and actually, this practice helps soil replenish nutrients. The poor gets free food, and even the critters benefit. The vineyard and olive grove gets the same treatment in the seventh year. This is an early form of crop rotation rest and social welfare combined. God is teaching them rhythm and trust. He can provide enough in year six to cover year seven. Later, he explicitly promises that, and the land belongs to him, not endless human exploitation. Pretty advanced for the time. Another one is Sabbath day. So 6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. We knew this from the Ten Commandments, but here the reason given is lovely. So, uh, so that your ox and your donkey may have relief, and your slave and the resident alien may be refreshed. Not only do you need a breather, but give your animals a day off. Let your servants chill, even the foreign laborers. Everyone gets to recharge. Period. The Sabbath is a great equalizer. Once a week, master and servant both just relax as human beings, not human doings. God setting up a culture of rest and empathy. By the way, imagine being an overworked servant hearing this law. Best news ever. A guaranteed day off because God said so. There's also a note. Be attentive to all that I have said to you. Make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let them be heard on your lips. So God basically saying, keep your focus and conversation pure of idolatry. Don't even speak those false gods' names as objects of worship. Yahweh should be the center of your speech and heart. Whew. Next, Moses outlines the annual festivals Israel is to celebrate, marking this as not just a law code but a lifestyle of worship and gratitude. First one, Feast of Unleavened Bread. This corresponds the to Passover time. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread as I commanded you at the time appointed in the month of Aviv, or the spring, for in it you came out of Egypt. So none shall appear before God empty-handed, meaning bring offerings. This feast commemorates the Exodus. They left Egypt in haste with no time for the bread to rise, and it happens early spring time frame. It's a week of remembering freedom with symbolic food, the flattened bread of affliction. Wow, we already have 44 minutes. I might need to kind of like fast forward the video when I'm editing it. I'm not even halfway. I'm close to being halfway. Wow, it's probably gonna be 2 hours long. Second one, Feast of Harvest. Celebrated with the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Early summer, about 7 weeks after Passover, which is later called, I'm probably gonna butcher this, but it's called Shavuot, and also Pentecost in Greek. It's a thanksgiving for God's provision. Moses calls it the feast of the first fruits of your labor. Third one, Feast of Ingathering, also known as Feast of Booths or Tabernacles. In the fall, at the end of the harvest year, at the end, at the end of the harvest year, when you gather in from the field the fruit of your labor. Hmm. Later, this will be called Sukkot, celebrated with living in booths or tents to remember the wilderness journey. It's basically the grand harvest festival. So that's three. So Moses says, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord God. And that's in verse 17. It doesn't mention women, but women often came too. However, men are representatives of households were required. These festivals ensured the whole nation paused to remember God's salvation. So unleavened bread, you know, thank God for provision, harvest, and celebrate his sustaining care, or which is the ingathering. So partying with a purpose. A few more rituals. Don't offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread. Uh, the fat of my the fat of my festival offering shall not be left until morning, meaning eat the feast meat timely. Don't let it spoil. Honor the offering as a special. One random but famous line: "You shall not boil a kid with a young goat in its mother's milk." It's in verse 19. Like this one puzzled people for ages. On the surface, it's a humane and symbolic restriction, like don't take what is meant to nourish life, a mother's milk, and use it to destroy life, like boiling the baby goat. It could also be a way to avoid imitating a Canaanite ritual, like something such a practice was a pagan fertility rite. Either way, it became the basis for Jewish kosher rules separating meat and dairy completely. So no cheeseburgers for observant later Jews, but at this moment, the Israelites probably just thought, well, that sounds grotesque. We won't do that. So now shifting from laws to promises, Moses delivers a prophetic message from God that must have electrified the camp. God says, I am going to send an angel before you to guard you on the way and bring you to the place I have prepared. An angel, a divine guide for the journey to Canaan. This isn't just an angelic being. God says, pay attention to him and listen to his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. So mysterious. It's as if this angel has God's very authority and presence. Some later interpreters even think this angel of the Lord might be a pre incarnate appearance of Christ, or at least very special manifestation of um God, because God's name, his essence is in him. The people are instructed to obey this angel completely. If they do, God will be an or yeah, if they do, God will be an enemy to their enemies. So God then lists the enemies by name. The Ammon Oh, here, let me read this. The Ammonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, Jebusites, and all the ites, squatting in the promised land. Um, God says, I will blot them out. But here's Israel's part. Don't bow down to their gods. Don't serve them. Don't follow their practices. Instead, overthrow these idols. Break their sacred pillars. They must remain loyal to God alone. Um, if they do, blessings galore. I will bless your bread and your water, food and drinks supply covered, check. And I will take sickness away from among you. Divine health plan, check. So no one shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the numbers of your days. So big family blessings and long life. It's basically stick with me and I'll take care of everything, provision, health, and growth. God continues with how he'll drive out the nations. I will send my terror before you and will throw into confusion all the people against whom you shall come. And indeed, I will send hornets before you. Like hornets, like yes, little literal stinging insects or figurative ones, either actual storms or metaphor of panics will help clear the land. The idea is the enemy will be so harried and scared, some will flee before Israel even fights. There's an old tradition that as Israel marched, terror swept ahead, like God's drone strikes in the form of angry bees. But there's a catch. God says He won't drive them out all at once in a single year, lest the land become desolate and wild animals multiply against you. Instead, little by little, He will clear them out. Um, so this is wise. If the inhabitants vanish overnight, the fields would go unattended, cities empty, and nature would overrun everything, making it harder for Israel to settle. So God's plan is gradual conquest. As Israel grows in number, they'll probably take over. He even sets the borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, so Sea of the Philistines, and from the desert to the Euphrates River, an expansive territory envisioned. However, critical warning: you shall make no covenant with them or with their gods. So they must not let the Canaanites remain in their land, or else these folks will lure Israel into sinning against God. So if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. God basically says zero tolerance. Don't buddy up with the pagan nations. Don't learn their idol worshiping ways, or you'll get trapped. Sadly, spoiler alert, we know from later history that Israel struggled with exactly this. But at this moment, they're just hearing this stern admonition and likely thinking, no way, we'll never bow to idols after what we've seen God do. Yeah, right. So this chapter ends on a motivating and cautionary note. God is leading the way, literally by his angel, and promises success if Israel stays obedient and distinct. So the covenant code given from chapter 21 to 23 has laid out what they must do. And now God emphasizes, what he will do. All right. Reflection. No, reflection. Fun fact corner. So, angel with God's name. God told Israel an angel would lead them. And my name is in him. This has intrigued scholars and scholars, Bible scholars. In Jewish traditions, some thought it was the archangel Michael. Others say it's just a special manifestation of God's presence. Many Christian interpreters have seen this as an Old Testament hint of the Logos or Christ, since only God truly has authority to forgive or not forgive sins. Whether one takes it that far or not, this angel was no ordinary winged messenger. He carried divine authority. All right, that's it for chapter 23. Okay, chapter 24, Sealing the Covenant, a mountaintop meal and tablets of stone. So, this is it. The covenant between God and Israel is about to be formally ratified, like signing a national charter, but with way more flair and blood than signing papers. This chapter reads like a dramatic ceremony scene in a movie. There's an altar, a young priest, blood splashing, a divine appearance, and a 40-day cliffhanger. So let me go ahead and set the stage. So Moses has delivered God's law to the people. Now God calls Moses and certain leaders to come up to the mountain for a covenant confirmation. The Lord says to Moses, "Come up, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the leaders of Israel, and worship from afar. Moses alone shall come near to the Lord. The others shall not come near, and the people shall not come up with him." So there's a clear boundary. Moses is the primary intermediary, but a select group gets to have a closer encounter than the masses. Moses goes and tells the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances, like a recap of everything in the past chapter. Like, how do the people respond? All the words that the Lord has spoken, we will do. It's like a unison shout. Imagine hundreds of thousands of voices saying, "We do." This is Israel effectively saying, "I accept to the terms of God's covenant." They're on board, at least verbally. Moses, being diligent, writes down all these words of the Lord. This is important. We're seeing the early formation of what would become scripture, of written covenant documents, not just oral tradition. Next, early the next morning, Moses gets up and builds an altar at the foot of the mountain and sets up 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. The altar represents God, and the pillars represent the people, the tribes. It's like setting the stage for a covenant ritual. Then Moses sends young men of the Israelites to perform sacrifices. They offer burnt offerings and sacrifice young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. Burnt offerings were wholly given to God, like burned up, symbolizing dedication. Peace offerings were partly eaten by worshippers in a fellowship meal. So these offerings likely served to atone and also to celebrate communion between God and Israel. Now, here's where it gets a bit bloody. Moses takes half the blood from the sacrifice and collects it in basins. The other half he splashes on the altar. So the altar is covered with half the blood, signifying perhaps God's pledge and his covenant sealed in blood. The remaining blood is in bowls. Then Moses reads from the book of the covenant, probably the very laws we've been covering, out loud to the people to make sure everyone hears it again. The people respond the second time. "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do, and we will be obedient." So it's like a moment in a wedding where the vows are repeated and the couple says, "I do," clearly for all to hear, sealing the promise. Israel twice affirms their commitment. "We'll do everything the Lord said. We're in." At that, Moses takes the other half of the blood and throws it on the people and says these powerful words: "Behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." So this is a dramatic seal. The people are now literally spattered with covenant blood. In ancient covenants, blood signified life and death. Seriously, if it breaks, if I break this covenant, let my blood be shed like the animals. It also purifies and bonds the parties. So the fact that both altar and people are touched by the same blood means they are now bound together by life and death promise. It's solemn, a bit scary, but also holy. All right. Now, with the covenant ratified, something amazing happens. Aaron's two elder sons, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel go up part way on the mountain, and it says, "They saw the God of Israel." Yeah. Usually elsewhere we hear no one can see God and live, but here something unique is going on. The text from the Bible describes under his feet a pavement of sapphire stone like the very heaven for clearness. Like wow. It's like they glimpsed the floor of God's throne. A brilliant blue gemstone pavement, clear as the sky. They likely didn't see God's face, likely a theophany where they see a form um, or just below him. But it was enough that the author is, stunned. God did not lay his hand on the chief men of Israel. They beheld God and ate and drank. In other words, they invited these representatives to a covenant meal in his presence, and mercifully, he didn't strike them down. Instead, he allowed them this fellowship. So imagine that scene, 74 people on the mountainside experiencing a vision of God's glory above them. The sapphire pavement shining, and they are sharing sacred meal, perhaps from the peace offerings sacrificed earlier. It's the first divine dinner party on record. How did the food taste? Probably like nothing on earth, eaten in awestruck silence or perhaps joyful worship. We can only speculate, but the significance is clear. The covenant wasn't just cold law and blood, it resulted in communion. They literally ate and drank in God's presence, signifying peace between him and Israel. In Israel, or well, in ancient times, eating together meant friendship and agreement. Here, God symbolically shares a table with these humans, a powerful sign that He's dwelling among them in relationship. After this extraordinary meal vision, the narrative. I've been talking for more than an hour. Oh my gosh. The narrative shifts back to God's instructions. The Lord calls Moses further up into the mountain. Come up to me on the mountain and wait here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and commandment which have I have written for their instruction. So the famous stone tablets. God's own handwriting of the Ten Commandments and perhaps summary of the law are in the stone. Moses is invited higher into the cloud for a long-term stay. Moses, ever the prepared leader, appoints deputies while he's away. He takes Joshua, his young assistant, his future successor, with him partway. Joshua will linger perhaps halfway up or near, as we find later. Moses tells the elders, wait here for us until we return. Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute can go to them. So basically, if any problem arises, talk to Aaron or Hur. Aaron, Moses' brother, and Hur, who is a respected leader, are left in charge of the camp. We'll later see how that turns out, but that's a story for another episode. Hint, hint, the golden calf fiasco is coming up. So Moses and Joshua ascend. A cloud of glory has been covering the mountain. The text from the Bible vividly says, the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. And on the seventh day, he called to Moses from the cloud. To the Israelites watching below, the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain. Imagine looking up, the summit is ablaze with bright, consuming fire inside the cloud. It's both terrifying and awesome. Moses steps into that cloud going higher up the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Very long retreat. And thus our scene ends with Moses enveloped in God's glory, cloud up on Sinai for an extended meeting with the Almighty. The elders have descended after their stunning meal, perhaps glowing with what they saw. The people in the camp know Moses is up there a long time. Maybe they watch that fire each day, wondering what's happening. Will he return? What is God telling him all this time? This is a bit of a cliffhanger for the narrative because famously during the 40-day span, the Israelites will get antsy, but Moses will be receiving intricate instructions. You know. Uh, Anyways, from my perspective, I guess this is the high point of covenant fellowship. It started with blood and ended with seeing God and feasting. It underscores that the covenant is now official. God and Israel are bonded like husband and wife, king and people. Wow. All right, fun fact corner. So they saw God, a rare glimpse, which is in Exodus 24, verse 10. This is one of the few places in the Bible where it explicitly says people saw the God of Israel and lived to tell about it. What exactly did they see? I've already talked about this, but the text only describes what was under his feet, which is a sapphire pavement, clear as the sky. This has led many to think they saw a theophany, um, an appearance of God in a form human can perceive. Some Jewish commentators li- liken the sapphire pavement to the foundation of heaven, and as if the elders were seeing up into God's realm. Interestingly, sapphire um is deep blue. The vision implies purity and transcendence. Clear blue sky under God's feet, symbolic of heaven itself. The fact that they ate and drank implies God invited them to a covenant meal. It's often compared to a state banquet in ancient treaties, where a king and his vassals share a meal after signing their agreement. Yeah. Uh, yeah. That's it for chapter 24. Home stretch, chapter 25, Blueprint from Heaven. Ooh. So this chapter marks a shift from laws and vows to God's construction project. Think of it as God becoming an interior designer and um architect, instructing Moses on how to build a sacred home to so he can dwell among his people. It's full of details about materials, dimensions, and furniture pieces like the Ark of the Covenant, a special table, and a lampstand, all very specific and symbolic. But rather than read it like a dry manual, let's bring some imagination. So Moses is still up on the mountaintop, enveloped in God's glory cloud. Perhaps he's got his stone tablet. God speaks to him in the thunder. Um, and Moses listens intently to every cubit and details. First, God tells Moses to take up a free will offering from the Israelites for the construction of a sanctuary. Um, Tell the Israelites to bring me an offering from all whose heart moves them. You shall receive my offering, and that's in chapter 25, verse 2. This is notable. It's not a tax or a forced thing. People should give as they, feel led. What kind of things are on God's wish list? The ultimate shopping list: gold, silver, bronze, um, blue, purple, and scarlet yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram's skin, fine leather, acacia wood, oil for lamps, spices for anointing oil and fragrant incense, onyx stones, and other gemstones for the ephod and breastpiece. Essentially, precious metals, luxurious fabrics, and skins, um, wood, oil, spices, and jewels. So these are the raw materials for building and decorating the tabernacle and making priestly garments. One might wonder, where would former slaves get all these? Remember, the Egyptians gave them lots of goods when they left. So this is where those treasures get repurposed for God. So God stated the purpose, and let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. So this is huge. The infinite God wants a home among his people. The word sanctuary means a holy place. He says, according to all that I show you regarding the pattern of the tabernacle and all its furniture, you shall make it. So that implies Moses might be shown a vision or a model of the heavenly pattern, like a divine blueprint. Now God starts with the most sacred object, working from the inside out of the tabernacle. All right, so the Ark of the Covenant. Make an ark of acacia wood, God says. Acacia wood was strong, dense, and resistant to rot and insects, perfect for long lasting furniture in the desert. Dimensions are as follows. Length is 2.5 cubits, width is 1.5 cubits, height is 1.5 cubits. In modern terms, roughly around 3.75 feet long, 2.25 feet wide, 2.25 feet high. If a cubit is about 18 inches, some say closer to 20 inches, which would make it about 4.3 feet by 2.6 feet. Um, well, in any case, a box may be the size of a, hope chest or large coffee table. It's to be overlaid with gold uh, inside and out. So basically, a golden plated chest with a um, molding around it like a decorative border. Um, Cast four gold rings for it attached to its 4 feet, two rings on each side, then make poles of acacia wood. Overlay them with gold and put them through the rings of the sides of the ark so it can be carried. Importantly, God says, the poles shall remain in the rings. They should not be taken out. So that ensures the ark can be transported without ever touching the ark itself. The carriers would handle it by the poles only as a sign of reverence. Now, the ark isn't meant to be an empty box. God tells Moses, "You shall put into the ark the testimony that I give you," which was in chapter 25, verse 16. Testimony refers to the two stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, essentially the written covenant from God. The ark is thus also called the Ark of the Testimony. It's a holy chest for holy documents. Later, a pot of manna and Aaron's staff that budded are added, according to other scriptures. But for now, the focus is the tablets. So then comes the ark's lid, which is very special. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. The term mercy seat basically is the atonement cover. The solid gold lid that goes on top of the ark, it's to be 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. Basically a flat golden cover, but it's not just a plain lid. God instructs to make two cherubim of gold of hammered work at the two ends of the mercy seat. Cherubim in biblical description are heavenly creatures, not chubby babies or cupid-like figures, but mighty. It's actually the exact opposite of cute little babies. But they're mighty angelic beings, often associated with guarding God's throne. Remember the cherubim with flaming sword guarding Eden's entrance, or the four-faced cherubim in Ezekiel's visions. So the exact appearance is not fully described here, but traditionally they are imagined with wings and maybe human angelic faces. I don't know. We don't really know. The text says the artisans should make the cherubim of one piece with the mercy seat on its two ends, meaning the cherubim and the lid are to be fashioned out as one single piece of gold. Ooh. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upwards, overshadowing the mercy seat, and they face each other looking down toward the mercy seat. Picture it like two angelic figures on top of the ark, wings arching toward each other, creating a sort of canopy or throne. God then declares, "You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark put the testimony that I will give you. There I will meet you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you about all that I will command you for the Israelites." So this is profound. The mercy seat is basically God's throne on the earth, the focal point of his presence. The space between those golden cherubim on that golden lid above the law inside the ark will be where God's glory concent- concentrates and his voice emanates. The ark is like the footstool of God's invisible throne. Later, Israel's history shows God's presence appearing over the ark in the Holy of Holies. It's the most sacred object, hence all the careful instructions. Think of it, a wooden chest covered in gold with golden um, angelic figures on top containing the covenant law. It symbolizes God's kingship, his angels attending him, his covenant inside, and atonement. Yeah, so it's heavy with meaning. And I was gonna print out a picture of it to show for my YouTube viewers, but I had forgotten to print it. So, anyways, all right. Now on to the table for bread. So God instructs a piece of furniture for the holy place, the table of showbread. You shall make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and 1.5 cubits high. In feet, it's about 3 feet long, 1.5 feet wide, 2.25 feet high, like a small coffee table or side table height. Overlay it with pure gold and make a gold molding around it. So, like the ark, it gets a little decorative. In fact, uh, what am I? I lost my train of thought. So, a hand, um, a handbreadth wide frame around the top with with a gold molding. This sounds so dry and boring, huh? It also has four gold rings at the corners of its four legs. The rings close to the frame with hold poles. Mobility was key for all of these items since the Israelites are on the move. Everything is designed to be like portable. The tables function, and you shall set the bread of the presence on the table before me continually. In other words, this is a table of showbread. In the tabernacle, it will hold 12 loaves of bread, representing the 12 tribes placed before God, replaced each week on the Sabbath with fresh loaves and old bread eaten by the priests. It's a continual offering symbolizing maybe Israel's fellowship with God or God's provision. It's like saying we always keep bread in God's house as a sign of our covenant relationship. It also represents dedicating the fruit of their labor to God constantly. God also details utensils, so plates, dishes, pitchers, and bowls for pouring drink offerings, and to be made of pure gold. So the table isn't bare; it's set with golden dinnerware, so to speak. Fine dining in the holy place. All right, next one is the golden lampstand or the menorah. And God says, "You shall make a lampstand of pure gold." This is the famous menorah. It's to be made of one piece of hammered gold base, stem, and branches, all continuous. The design, it has a central shaft and 6 branches extend from its sides. 3 branches on one side and 3 on the other. So 7 lamps total, including the center. Picture a stylized almond tree with a trunk and 3 pairs of curving branches. God gives artistic details. Each branch is to have cups shaped like almond blossoms with buds and petals. Each branch has 3 such cups, and the central stem has 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms with buds and petals. there's like a there's like a bud under each pair of branches where they extend from the stem. So the whole thing looks like a golden flowering tree, specifically an almond tree, which in Hebrew is um, hang on, let me just look it up. All right, so in Hebrew it's called shaked, which is it's it primarily means almond or almond almond tree, related to a word meaning watchful or wakeful. The almond tree blossoms early. There's a prophetic pun in Jeremiah about God watching over his word with an almond rod vision. So in any case, it's a tree of light, perhaps symbolic of the tree of life of or God's light in the world. The lampstand has seven lamps set on the top. The lamps themselves were small bowl like oil lamps that would hold olive oil and a wick. God instructs that the lamps be set up to give light in front of the lampstand. So likely it was placed so that it would illuminate the table and the space. Also, God orders its accessories, gold snuffers and trays. All of it is to be made of a talent of pure gold. A talent is a weight measure, so roughly 75 pounds or 34 kilograms of gold, which is a lot of gold. Um, this lampstand would be quite heavy and valuable. The skill to make it from one piece with all those ornate parts must have been God given. The craftsman, well, later we hear of Bezalel, who is the craftsman, filled with the Spirit of God to do this work. So God reminds Moses, see that you make them according to the pattern shown to the pattern shown to you on the mountain. That's the refrain. Moses isn't to wing it or let the craftsman get creatively divergent. They have to follow the exact design God has revealed. Why? Because these items are earthly copies of heavenly realities, perhaps, and each detail has significance. So, summing up this chapter, God has given blueprints for three key items: the ark with the mercy seat and cherubim, the table of showbread, and the lampstand. If you visualize the tabernacle layout, the ark goes in the inner sanctum. The table and lampstand go in the outer room. The table on the north side, lampstand on the south side. According to later chapters, together these pieces symbolize God's covenant, God's provision, and His presence. And also God's light and His life for the lampstand. So in a way, it's like furnishing God's house, a throne, which is the ark, a table with bread, like the dining table, and then a lamp to light the room. For the Israelites, these instructions meant something big. God was planning to move in with them. They'd have a physical, tangible tent where God's glory would dwell, and a fancy furniture to go with it. It must have been exciting and probably a little intimidating. Who's sufficient to craft this stuff? And it would have been such a big honor to, craft those. But remember, God steered the heart of people to give the materials and endowed craftsmen with skill. It was truly a community project with divine direction. Yeah. So the chapter shows worship on God's name. Detailed plans, so I may dwell among them. The goal isn't decor, it's nearness. The ark, law inside, mercy, love, seed, truth, and grace meet where atoning blood is sprinkled. The blood of bread has 12 loaves before God's signal ongoing fellowship and provision. God invites His people to His table. And the lampstand, continuous light in a dark tent. So God's guidance, life, and revelation. His people are to keep the flame tended. So honor God's truth while seeking His mercy. Maintain grateful communication with Him and rely on His Spirit to keep your witness bright. Giving is voluntary, whose heart moves them, because real worship flows from willing hearts. And the infinite choosing a tent to travel with nomadic people foreshadows Jesus tabernacling among them. Intentional design, generous hearts, and God's desire to dwell in His with His people. So that's the heartbeat of chapter 25. Now on to the fun fact corner. All right, so what is inside the ark? Initially, the ark was to house the two stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. In Hebrews 9, verse 4, and other verses note that eventually it also contained Aaron's rod that budded and a golden pot of manna as memorials. Aaron's rod was a staff that miraculously sprouted almond blossoms as a sign of his priesthood. That's actually very cool. The manna pot was kept as a reminder of God's provision. By Solomon's time, however, only the tablet were in the ark, perhaps indicating the other items were lost or removed or maybe stolen. I don't know. But in any case, the ark was like a time capsule of God's miraculous relationship with Israel. Tablets equals God's words or law. The rod equals God's chosen priesthood and power to bring life. The dead stick blossomed. Like that's like the coolest thing. And God's chosen, and then the rod. No, the manna is God's daily bread from heaven. So Christian typology in Christian typology, these three items symbolically point to Jesus, the law he fulfilled, um, the rod of the high priest, which is, he is our high priest and resurrection life, and the manna, he is the bread of life. So no wonder the ark is sometimes seen as a symbol of Christ, or even Mary, who carried Christ inside her in some traditions. Yeah. Wow. And that's a wrap for Exodus episode 5. I don't know if you noticed, I'm wearing different clothes now because it's actually the next day. I was not able to finish recording yesterday because it was a lot. I need to take a break. But yeah. Even today, actually, my throat is a little bit sore, and I've been drinking tea. All right, so what an epic journey we've been on in this episode. So from detailed laws about oxen and honesty to a breathtaking covenant ceremony with God's own fire and sapphire show, all the way to blueprint downloads for a golden ark and heavenly lampstand. Like who knew terms and conditions could be so dramatic and dare I say heartwarming. So next episode, this picture this my brain. So next episode, picture this. Moses is on Mount Sinai receiving these grand instructions. Down below, the Israelites know their leader is in conference with God, but they've been waiting for weeks now. What's brewing in the camp? They pledge obedience. They even saw a glimpse of God on the mountain, but humans have short memories and weaker faith when fear kicks in. As I always say, people be peopling. So when episode 6 rolls around, we might find things have gone a bit sideways in Moses' absence. Will the covenant they agreed to be broken before the ink even dries? We'll see. We will see. Well, anyways, thank you so much for listening to Chapters and Chuckles by Kaye. If you've been listening up to this point, kudos on you, because that was a very, very, dry material. I tried. So if you've listened, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow, subscribe, or leave a review. You can catch new episodes only on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, keep laughing, and as always, stay curious.